This is May 13th. I decided I'm gonna give an update on my number one primary Bigfoot research slash experience area as a series because there's interactions every single time I visit this particular location, which is remote in state forest in Pennsylvania. So the second time I went to that area was last August 2019, and I specifically decided I'm just going to sit and wait at the last hour or two of daylight and simply see what happens where a tree had been knocked over before and they'd made themselves known to me. So I did that. I sat down against a tree in the area and simply waited. And there were three things that happened that were very unique, and I just finally understood the final third part of the chapter today because I received an email from another Bigfoot researcher that is investigating these things much more seriously than I have been, in fact. Well, here are the three things that occurred on that fateful August warm evening. Number one, a full 2 hours before dark, there were two what sounded like owls talking back and forth. They were hooting. They first of all sounded just like owls, but it sounded like there were two of them, and they were several hundred yards off to the northeast. And I thought they were owls at first, but it started to dawn on me that number one, it's broad daylight. Number two, there's two of them. Number three, they're moving across the ridge in front of me, and over the next hour they covered several hundred yards until they were actually parallel with me, and I was looking at them a couple hundred yards straight ahead. And I was suspicious that these were not owls. So here's the second part that I thought was fascinating. I just figured out today. In addition to the owls, I heard dogs barking. I mean, absolutely, these were dogs, I thought. And they were in the same area where the owls were hooting. So I just thought there was somebody out there with a dog walking in the thick stuff near where the owls were. I'm starting to have second opinions on that because I decided to stay until dusk. And so I'd heard these owls talking back and forth they were in thick laurel across the ridge from where I was, a couple hundred yards away. And I'd heard dogs barking. Again, this is in a remote area, and I should have thought, you know what, the chances of the dogs barking in this area are pretty slim. So the final thing that happened as it started to get dark and the sun set was I continued to sit where I was, and these things were across a ravine from me in heavy thick brush. As soon as it started to get dark, I heard one large, very heavy creature come down through the thick brush to the bottom of this creek, which is between me and where they were originally. And it was moving very slowly and very deliberately, and it definitely sounded bipedal. It did not sound like a bear or a deer. I mean, and it was heavy. I highly suspect it was the big man of that valley, and I think he was just letting me know that this is his area, and there was no aggression. They were fully aware of my presence, I believe, and they were simply moving into position in an area that they have claimed. So I have since made a third trip to this area over the last couple weeks, and it was one of my most exciting, eventful encounters. And I have a story for you in the next video. Stay tuned. So this is the continuation of the Power of Bigfoot series. This is my third encounter, which happened a couple of weeks ago. I had specifically gone back to the exact same area where I had been previously twice. And I sat down a couple hours before dark and just waited. And I did bring a recorder with me, and I thought I had 2 hours of recording. It turns out I only had an hour and 15 minutes before the battery shut off. So sure enough, I was waiting, and near dusk is when these creatures come out of their hiding, wherever they are hiding. Whether it's underground, in a cave, in thick brush, or another dimension. They will come out around dusk, and this is their morning. They're usually quite, energetic, and I'd like to mention that in this area, the only time that they showed any sort of aggression was when I was aggressively moving in their area, scouting for deer. When I'm sitting, they don't interpret that as any form of aggression at all. And they seem to know that I'm just there to observe, kind of like a wildlife biologist would observe, like Jane Goodall. So this is the approach that I'm taking, and it's working. So, close to dusk, I heard some really faint vocals that sounded kind of like perhaps Indian or perhaps Sasquatch, or didn't sound quite human, very far off, but I wasn't 100% sure. So I did continue to simply wait, and then sure enough, later on, I heard some distinct vocalizations that I've heard from other YouTubers who are recording Sasquatch. And I traced it back to a specific recording that I have marked, and I plan to go back there and to do some more recording. But unfortunately, I did not catch this on my recorder that evening due to dead batteries. So that was fascinating. That was the best part of the trip. And then finally, the last part was they switched from doing a vocalization in a language or communication that I don't understand to their basic whoops. And if you've never heard that, a whoop, you've got to hear this. I mean, that's their primal call. Simply, it's a locator call, in my opinion, letting the Sasquatch know where they are in the woods and their positioning, because they do position themselves, especially when there's a human, because we are a threat. You know, there's a lot of people out there that would like nothing better than to knock one of these guys off their feet with a hunting rifle, and that is something they have to keep in mind. That's why they're always defensive when they see an intruder invading their area, and I think they simply hang back and monitor the situation. And they're looking for peaceful contact. They are a peaceful, natural being, and fully in tune with their environment, fully able to survive with modern humans. I think we're kind of a joke to them as far as, they're always a step ahead of us. I will say that when they're in close proximity to you, they sound biological. I mean, you can hear them walking, you can hear them, their lung capacity producing these whoops, and language, which I do plan to get more recording attempts in the very near future. But they seem biological when they're close by. So it's a wonderful mystery. The final thing that happened on that evening, the last time I was out, was I was heading back to my truck, and I decided to go as far as I could without a flashlight, simply because I want to blend into the environment. I want to be non-obtrusive, and I also want to work on my low light ability, because it pays off. If you can move through the dusk woods with your own eyesight and not have to pull out a lantern, you're gonna blend in more. So here's the final thing that happened. I just paused briefly before I was gonna make a turn back to the road and back to my pickup. And when I did, there were apparently there was some buzzing right in front of me at the forest floor. I heard some buzzing, and I actually saw some leaves flipping around, swirling around, and I thought it was probably bees. And to this day, I cannot say for sure though, because right after that happened, fairly close to me, the closest that evening, became two very audible whoops. At the time, I thought I had them on the recorder, which I had on my body, and it was on, but they were loud, and I can't help but wonder if there was a connection between those whoops and the buzzing noise or not. So I'll have to do some more investigations. So when I got back to the road, and then I followed it back to my truck, I looked at my recorder, and it was flashing low battery. So it wasn't until the next day at home, I put it into my computer and noticed that it had shut off after 1 hour and 15 minutes in broad daylight, and none of these vocalizations were recorded this time. So I'm making amends for the future recording sessions where I'm not going to run out of batteries. I'm going to have the microphone set up where they're active, and I should get some recordings here within the next month. I'll be glad to share them with the Bigfoot community. This is a great community, people that are awake, people that are willing to experience this phenomenon directly without filters, and it is absolutely truly amazing how these researchers are coming together, and we're validating things from the west coast to the east coast up to Canada. These beings have traits, they have vocalizations that can be identified by those who are fascinated by this subject.